The coffee shop was loud with the ordinary chaos of a Saturday morning. Blenders, strollers, the hiss of a milk steamer. David Cole was reaching for napkins when four small voices spoke almost in unison, the way only siblings who've practiced finishing each other's sentences can. "Our mom has a tattoo just like yours," said the tallest of the girls, no older than 8, pointing at the inside of his left forearm. David's hand stopped midair. On his skin, a small constellation of 5 stars arranged around a single date, March 14th, a mark so specific, so deliberately uncommon, that fewer than a dozen people on Earth could plausibly share it by coincidence. David was 34, a structural engineer, and had raised his daughter Mia alone since she was 6 months old. He wasn't a man easily rattled. He'd once redesigned load-bearing supports for a 12-story building under a 48-hour deadline without losing sleep. But the tattoo on his arm wasn't decoration. It marked the date, 9 years ago, when his first daughter Ellie was born 11 weeks premature and lived only 6 days in the NICU. The 5 stars represented the 5 nurses who sat with him the night she died, none of whom he'd spoken to since. The girls, Harper, Wren, Sadie, and June, were quadruplets, age 8, waiting with their grandmother while their mother underwent treatment 2 floors above the coffee shop inside Oakview Medical Center's oncology unit. Their mother, Renee Okafor, had been diagnosed 11 months earlier with stage 3 ovarian cancer, a prognosis that came with a 34% 5-year survival estimate, a statistic Renee had memorized the way some people memorize scripture, repeating it to herself as both warning and permission to prepare. David's mind raced through a single impossible question. How could a stranger's tattoo match his, star for star, date for date? The answer, it turned out, had nothing to do with chance. 9 years ago, in the same ICU on the same night Ellie died, another infant 2 rooms down did not survive either. Her name was Ruth. Her mother was Renee. The 5 stars weren't David's idea alone. They were the design a NICU grief counselor named Patricia had sketched for any parent who asked for something to mark the night, a small ritual offered to over 40 families across a decade, most of whom never knew of the others. For 14 months after Ellie's death, David attended a Tuesday evening peer support group for parents of infant loss, meeting in a windowless room at the hospital's East Wing. Renee had joined that same group 7 months after him. Their attendance never overlapped by more than 2 shared sessions, and in a room where people rarely made eye contact through their grief, neither remembered the other's face. What they shared instead, unknowingly, was Patricia's tattoo design and a single date carved into both their arms for entirely separate children. What David didn't know, standing frozen in that coffee shop, was that Renee had gone on to have the quadruplets through IVF 18 months after Ruth's death, a pregnancy her doctors called statistically improbable to carry to viable term, with a documented success rate below 3% for her specific fertility profile at the time. She had beaten odds most specialists don't see beaten in an entire career. Now, 9 years later, a different set of odds, the oncology kind, was closing in, and Renee had begun quietly arranging who would raise her daughters when she couldn't. Renee's mother, watching David's face change as the girl spoke, made a decision she'd debated for 3 weeks. She told him Renee had been searching for the other parents from that Tuesday group for over a year, not out of nostalgia, but because she wanted her daughters to grow up knowing the handful of people who understood grief the way she did, in case she ran out of time to explain it herself. David's name had been on a list of people to find, tucked inside Renee's hospital bag the entire 11 months of her treatment. David went upstairs. Renee, thinner than the photos on her daughter's phone cases, recognized the tattoo before she recognized his face. "You were the dad in the blue jacket," she said, a detail she'd carried for 9 years without a name attached to it. They talked for 40 minutes, comparing timelines that had run parallel without ever touching until this exact morning. Same floor, same year, same grief counselor, same design inked into skin, 340 miles apart in the years since, as David had since relocated for work, and Renee had stayed near Oakview. David didn't offer money or grand gestures. He offered something Renee's support network was thin on: consistency. He began driving the 90-minute round trip every other Sunday, first to sit with Renee during infusions, then to take the girls to the same park where he took Mia. It wasn't framed as guardianship or adoption. Not yet. Not officially. But within 5 months, David had become the person Renee's daughters called when they needed someone steady, and the girls had become, in David's words, the sisters Mia never got to have. Renee's cancer entered remission 10 months after that coffee shop morning. Against odds, her oncology team had quietly stopped promising anyone. Together, she and David tracked down 6 other families from Patricia's old Tuesday group, families who had carried the same 5-star tattoo without knowing a dozen strangers shared it. They founded the 5th Star Circle, a peer network now connecting 63 families across 3 states who lost infants in NECU care, the first program of its kind built entirely by former patients rather than hospital staff, specifically because, as Renee put it, the ones who lived through it designed better rooms than the ones who only studied it. David spent 9 years believing his grief was a private mark only he carried. He never imagined a stranger's 4 daughters would recognize it on sight, or that the recognition would matter more than any coincidence should reasonably be allowed to. The lesson isn't that fate arranged a meeting in a coffee shop. It's that shared pain, even carried in silence for nearly a decade by people who never met, has a way of finding its match. If someone is paying enough attention to ask the question a child asked without hesitation, "Why does your arm look like my mom's?"